Hi guys, this is Eli from Elfbait. So day 5 for the 30-day Dungeons and Dragons challenge. It sucks. Favorite die or dice? Okay, dice. I have a collection of dice like everybody else, and for me, I love getting new dice. I love collecting dice. I love playing with dice. I fiddle with them. I stack them, whatever. But I don't have a favorite set. And if I do have a favorite set, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do that. No. If we had to go favorite die type, my favorite die is the D100, not the ever rolling sphere of craziness with the sand in or beads or whatever it is. No. 2 die 10 rolled together. Why? Because some of my favorite systems in the world have used die 10 systems, and so D10s. I feel like I should say D12 because it is the bastard child of the Dragon Dice set and it needs love, but that's the D12's fault. If it was more useful, people would like it more, and it wouldn't be off to the side. 5th edition seems to have gone out of its way to make uses for the D12, and I love that. But anyways, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to turn this into a combination video of day 5 and 6. 5 was their favorite die. Lame. Day 6, favorite deity. What do you say with that? I mean, what are you talking about? Historical deities? Campaign world specific deities? Deities from homebrew worlds. I mean, from books. I mean, so this is the Dungeons and Dragons challenge. So, I haven't played a lot of clerics. I haven't played a lot of paladins. So, my relationship with fantasy deities is an indirect one. As a DM, mostly running them as either support or opposition for other people's characters. I'm not overly familiar with deities in other campaign settings because really I've never had a player who made a huge deal about it. And while I've run campaigns and I've run adventures where certainly deities come into play, I've done a lot of homebrew. Most of my gaming has been done in homebrew settings, so it's been mishmashes of real world gods, or custom deities that I made for the settings. If I had to pick a D&D god that is my favorite for any campaign setting, it's a toss-up between Lolth and Takaisis. Takaisis, however you want to. So why Lolth? Lolth is cool. Lolth is badass. She's just got this mystique about it. Spiders are spooky, and in some weird ways, spiders are kind of sexy. Not actual spiders, but there's that creepiness, that slinkiness that often comes with spider mystique. It's the danger. It's just I don't know. But so Lolth has this about her. She's ruthless, and it trickles down through her society. And it makes for a really great evil god to have in a game. And the good gods they're good gods. They don't play off as you don't remember them as the god of corn or the god of good drink, the god of luck. These guys are never as memorable as the freaking demon queen of spiders. But if not for Lolth, it then has to be Takaisis. Takaisis from Dragonlance. I like Takaisis because Takaisis is really she's just Tiamat. I mean, the authors, of Dragonlance, they took the concept of Tiamat and they jazzed it up. Tiamat it's a Babylonian god turned into the Queen of the Dragons for AD&D. And I believe earlier, it's a borrowed god that they just plugged into the game. while it's cool that you have this dragon that has one head for each of the chromatic, races of dragons, Takaisis elevates that concept and turns it into something itself. It turns it into something unique. Takaisis really took that Babylonian goddess or god or demon dragon, whatever you want to call it, and turned it into a memorable deity. I liked Takaisis because she had her demonic form, and maybe I like this about Lolth too. They both have their bestial forms. The form that they use to be scary and snarly and nasty, but then they have their other forms. They can both appear much more human, and this is the form that they manipulate. So they used to manipulate and get in under people's skins, whether it's through seduction or threatening or just social interaction, whatever it is. They're complex deities. They are perfectly capable of being scary as all expletive. They're perfectly capable of just being the towering dragon or this venom drooling spider witch. But they can also then appear. They could walk into your throne room in human form, give you an ultimatum. They can masquerade as somebody you might meet on the street. Now, this is not unique to them in the long run. Most gods in most mythologies can shape change pretty much at will and appear as other things, but they don't. Takaisis and Lolth both really have this mystique about them, and that I think is why, out of all the deities in fantasy realms, those are the two that stick out in my mind. There is Saint Cuthbert from Greyhawk. He's a demigod, and he kind of always struck me as neat because I love demigods. Demigods, I call it a leftover from classic humanities, whatever it is. But I like the fact that demigods are these characters that are kind of in between divinity and mortality. Thor always struck me as much more like in tune with the rest of the demigod characters. For example, Perseus. These guys are all complex characters. So in fantasy, Saint Cuthbert in Greyhawk was always kind of one of those guys. He was very much close to the men of Earth and of Orth, but he was divine, but he had been elevated to divinity. He was a saint. He was a man. He was just a regular dude, and then he became a saint. So I mean, if it's not Lolth and Takaisis, I always hear it Takaisis, and it just doesn't. Takaisis just always sounds like it has more bite. But anyways, Takaisis sounds like I should be dipping it in salsa and eating it. I'm gonna go deep fry some Takaisis and snack, whatever. But so yeah, it's that makes for a pretty quick video. If I was to extend it to homebrew, well, first of all, I hate doing that because that as a world designer, talking about your favorite deity, well, of course it's your favorite. You made it. One of my favorite deities I created was for my Artera world that I ran, from like junior high all the way up to my mid 30s. The Helmdraken. Helmdraken was this lich guy who had elevated himself to godhood in my campaign settings. I suppose he's loosely inspired by Vecna, though Vecna was also a guy. Helmdraken was kind of a he was an enchanter who had turned necromancer. He as a power base, he would combine necromancy as well as enchantment, and so he was into a lot of things like changing. He made a lot of not aberrations, but monstrosities and stuff in the campaign setting. There was an entire part of my campaign world that was his. So Helm Draken was this demigod lich character who existed physically in my campaign world. And there was this whole realm, this forest that surrounded the Draken Forest. And then there was his keep that rose out of the center of it. And trying to get to his keep, why you would want to go there, I don't know, was dangerous in and of itself, because the forest was running wild with all kinds of what were referred to collectively as Draken beasts. They were basically anything that Helm Draken had conjured up, whether that would be, spy bats or these weird wolves that had hands on their front paws and were intelligent, or there was a monster that was created by so Helm Draken was evil, and as an enchanter, as well as a necromancer, and even though he was evil beyond, and he was kind of a lichy type character, he used enchantment to hide his true nature. So Helm Draken had wives, and he wasn't very nice to them. He's a villain, so I didn't really feel too bad about writing a story in there where his wives, the way he got rid of his wives and moved on to his next wife, would be to turn them into monsters and let them loose in his forest. So, and why did I create these monsters? I like sympathetic monsters, and so having a monster that's not a monster for monster's sake appeals to me. And so at the same time, I also like non-sympathetic monsters. I like monsters for monsters' sake, so I guess I just like monsters. But Helm Draken was this nasty villain who often was at the center of evil plots in the campaign setting. He was wicked and manipulative, and often, even though would never show up on his own, he would have his hands in things, whether that was manipulating people through the powers of enchantment, or using, giving or backing people with his powers. But he was a god. He was, in my campaign world, he was the god of necromancy. He wasn't the god of death, and he wasn't a guardian of the dead, but he had himself risen to power, godlike power, and claimed for himself the position in the campaign world as the god of necromancy, not the god of death, but the god of the control of death, the manipulation of death. And so many of his creatures were also undead, but the worst of his creatures were these weird sort of necromantic enchantment hybrids, where he might have dead flesh that was twisted, or even living flesh that lived in a state of semi-undeath. Kind of the weird hybrid creatures. It just gave me this excuse to just go crazy. His fortress had living walls and, killer doors and stuff. I mean, it was just really cool. It was a fun villain to work with. But yeah, so favorite deities from published works: Lolth and Takaisis. Honorable mention for Saint Cuthbert, just for being a good old guy who really looks out for us people on the ground. And then for my own homebrew, Helm Draken, the Necromancer Supreme, Lord of Undeath in my campaign setting of Arterra. All those guys did their duty, and or ladies for the Lolth and Takaisis. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of an odd one to say. I mean, again, I can't say that I have too many favorites, because as a DM, you're often throwing the god of the week, and having created multiple worlds, I have lots of pantheons that I've created and stuff for various campaign settings. But anyways, again, like, share, subscribe, leave your comments below on your favorite gods, why it is you like them, what it is about them. Do you have a favorite god that maybe isn't in a D&D game that really appeals to you from a book or something? Certainly share them all. There's room for them all in the comments. Anyways, get out in game, and thanks for checking us out again.